The dust swirled across the empty schoolyard as Wilhelmina Vance clutched her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders, watching the last wagon disappear into the distance. At 22, she never imagined she would find herself completely alone in Eagle Pass, Texas, abandoned by the very people who had promised her security when they'd brought her west to teach their children. The year was 1875, and the brutal summer heat beat down on the small wooden schoolhouse that had been both her workplace and her home for the past 3 months. The drought had forced most families to move on, seeking better fortunes elsewhere, and the town committee had departed that morning after informing her they could no longer afford her services. They'd left her with nothing but a month's wages and vague directions to the next settlement, over 50 miles away. Wilhelmina Willa, to the few who had gotten close enough to use her nickname, stared at her single trunk of belongings and the small satchel that contained all of her worldly possessions. The stage wouldn't come through for another week, and she had nowhere to go. Her family back east in Boston thought she was thriving in her new position. The shame of returning home a failure was almost as terrifying as the prospect of remaining alone in the nearly abandoned town. The sun was beginning to set when she heard the steady rhythm of hoofbeats approaching from the west. Willa tensed, knowing that unaccompanied women were vulnerable in these parts. She retreated into the shadow of the schoolhouse doorway, one hand gripping the small Derringer pistol her father had insisted she carry. As the rider came into view, Willa could make out the broad shoulders of a man astride a powerful chestnut stallion. His face was partially obscured by the wide brim of his hat, but there was no mistaking the confident way he sat in the saddle, a cowboy through and through. He pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of the schoolyard and surveyed the building. His eyes, sharp and blue as a summer sky, found her in the shadows. "Miss Vance." His voice carried across the yard, deep and clear. Willa stepped forward cautiously, the Derringer still clutched in her hand. "Who's asking?" The man dismounted in one fluid motion, removing his hat to reveal sun-streaked brown hair and a face weathered by years under the open sky. He couldn't have been more than 30, but his eyes held the wisdom of a man who had seen much in his years. "Name's Gabriel Dawson. I own the Triple D Ranch about 10 miles north of here." He took a step forward, then stopped when he noticed her wariness. "Judge Parker sent me, said the town committee left you high and dry." "Judge Parker?" Willa's brow furrowed. The elderly circuit judge had been kind to her during his last visit, but she hadn't expected him to remember her existence once he'd moved on. He telegraphed this morning, said a young schoolteacher needed assistance. Gabriel Dawson's gaze fell on her trunk and satchel. Looks like he was right. "I don't need charity, Mr. Dawson." Willa lifted her chin despite the desperation of her situation. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "It's not charity I'm offering, Miss Vance. My sister runs a school for the children of my ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders. She's expecting a baby any day now and needs someone to take over teaching duties." He gestured toward her belongings. "You've got experience and we've got a position. Seems providential, doesn't it?" Willa hesitated, weighing her limited options. Stay here alone in a ghost town, try to make it 50 miles to the next settlement on her own, or accept this cowboy's offer. As if sensing her internal debate, Gabriel Dawson stepped forward again, his expression softening. "Miss Vance, I give you my word as a gentleman that you'll be safe at Triple D. We've got a proper room for you in the main house, good food, and children eager to learn." He extended his hand. "You're coming home with me, that is, if you'll agree." Something in the way he said home made Willa's heart twist with longing. It had been so long since she'd had a real home. "I accept your offer, Mr. Dawson," she said, finally lowering the Derringer, "though I'd appreciate knowing more about what I'm getting myself into." Gabriel nodded, a genuine smile transforming his face. "Fair enough. Let me load up your things and we can talk on the way." As he lifted her trunk with ease, Willa noticed the strength in his arms and the gentleness with which he handled her possessions. For the first time since the committee had left her that morning, she felt a flicker of hope. Within minutes, Gabriel had secured her trunk to his horse and helped her mount behind him. The sensation of being pressed against his solid back as they rode away from the abandoned schoolhouse was both alarming and comforting. Willa Vance, the proper Boston lady who had come west seeking independence, was now quite literally placing her life in a stranger's hands. "Hold on tight, Miss Vance," Gabriel called over his shoulder as they picked up pace. "Triple D awaits." As they rode north through the gathering dusk, Eagle Pass falling away behind them, Willa couldn't help but wonder if this unexpected twist of fate might be leading her exactly where she needed to go. The journey to Triple D Ranch took them through rolling hills dotted with mesquite and live oak. As night fell, Gabriel kept a steady pace, occasionally pointing out landmarks visible in the moonlight. "That's Comanche Ridge," he said, nodding toward a jagged silhouette against the star-filled sky. Legend says Chief Yellow Wolf and his warriors used it as a lookout point during the border wars. Willa, who had been clinging to Gabriel's waist with increasing familiarity as the miles passed, leaned slightly to see better. "Is there still trouble with the Comanche?" Gabriel shook his head. "Not around here. Most bands are on reservations now. Yellow Wolf signed a peace treaty 5 years back. He comes through occasionally to trade. Good man, fair trader." The casual way he spoke of such matters reminded Willa how different this world was from Boston. In the East, such figures were distant threats discussed in newspaper articles. Here they were neighbors with names and reputations. "How much farther?" she asked, unable to keep the weariness from her voice. The day's events had taken their toll, and despite the solid warmth of the man before her, the night air had grown cold. Gabriel urged the horse around a bend in the trail. "Just over this rise. You can see the ranch lights now." True to his word, as they crested the hill, Willa saw dozens of twinkling lights spread across a valley below. The main house was an impressive 2-story structure, with several smaller buildings clustered nearby and corrals extending outward. Even in the darkness, she could tell it was a substantial operation. "That's quite a ranch," she managed, surprised by the scale. Gabriel's chuckle rumbled through his back against her chest. "My father started with 20 acres and 10 head of cattle. Now we've got 20,000 acres and over 2,000 head. Triple D is the largest ranch in this part of Texas." There was pride in his voice, but no arrogance. As they approached, dogs began barking, announcing their arrival. Lights appeared in windows, and by the time they reached the main yard, a woman stood on the porch with a lantern held high. "That's my sister, Dorothy," Gabriel explained as he helped Willa dismount. Her legs felt wobbly after the long ride, and she was grateful for his steadying hand on her elbow. Dorothy Dawson Fleming was a striking woman in her late 20s, her rounded belly evident beneath her nightdress and wrapper. Her hair, the same warm brown as her brother's, was braided for sleep, and her eyes held the same direct gaze. "So you found her," Dorothy said, her voice warm with relief. "We were beginning to worry." "Miss Wilhelmina Vance, meet my sister, Dorothy Fleming," Gabriel said formally, leading Willa up the porch steps. Dorothy immediately embraced Willa, surprising her with the warmth of her welcome. "Thank God you're here. These children need teaching, and I need to get off my feet before my husband has a conniption." "James is hovering again?" Gabriel asked with a knowing grin. "Like a mother hen with one chick," Dorothy confirmed, rolling her eyes affectionately. "He's convinced I'll deliver this baby while reaching for a book or filling the water pitcher." Willa, overwhelmed by the swift change in her circumstances, managed a small smile. "I'm grateful for the opportunity, Mrs. Fleming." "Dorothy, please," the woman insisted, ushering her inside. "We don't stand on ceremony here at Triple D. Come in, you must be exhausted. Gabe, have Miguel bring Miss Vance's things to the blue room." The interior of the ranch house was a revelation. Willa had expected frontier simplicity, but the spacious entrance hall featured polished wooden floors, a grand staircase, and walls adorned with paintings. It was rustic elegance, a perfect blend of refinement and practicality. "This is beautiful," Willa said, turning slowly to take it all in. Gabriel, who had removed his hat upon entering, looked pleased by her reaction. "My mother's influence. She was determined we wouldn't live like savages just because we were 100 miles from civilization." A tall, sandy-haired man descended the stairs, his expression brightening when he saw Dorothy. "You found her, Gabe. Excellent." He extended his hand to Willa. "James Fleming, madam. I'm the lucky fool who married into this family." "And the ranch doctor," Gabriel added. "Trained at Harvard Medical School before deciding to waste his talents patching up cowboys and delivering calves." James grinned good-naturedly. "Don't believe a word he says, Miss Vance. I came west for adventure and found love instead." He slipped an arm around Dorothy's shoulders. "Best decision I ever made." The easy affection between the couple made Willa's heart ache with a longing she hadn't acknowledged in years. Since her fiancé's death in a factory accident 3 years earlier, she'd buried herself in work, convincing herself that independence was preferable to risking her heart again. "Miss Vance must be tired," Dorothy said, breaking into her thoughts. "James, ask Rosa to bring up some warm water and a light supper to the blue room." "I hate to be a bother," Willa began, but Gabriel cut her off with a gentle shake of his head. "No one's bothered. That's not how we do things here." His eyes met hers, steady and reassuring. "You're home now, Miss Vance." That word again, home. It resonated in places Willa had thought long closed off. Dorothy led her upstairs to a lovely corner bedroom decorated in shades of blue and cream. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, with a writing desk beneath a window, a washstand, and a comfortable-looking armchair completing the furnishings. "This will be your room for as long as you're with us," Dorothy explained, lighting lamps around the space. "The schoolhouse is just behind the main house. You can see it from this window in the daylight. There are 12 children currently, ages 5 to 15. "That's a wide range," Willa observed, running her fingers along the smooth wooden footboard of the bed. "Frontier education," Dorothy said with a shrug. "We make do. The older ones help with the younger ones." She sank gratefully into the armchair. "I've left lesson plans and records in the schoolhouse desk. You'll start Monday, which gives you tomorrow to rest and get your bearings." A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of Willa's trunk, carried by a young Mexican man who nodded respectfully before departing, and a middle-aged woman bearing a tray of food and a pitcher of steaming water. "This is Rosa Mendez, our housekeeper and cook," Dorothy introduced them. "Rosa, this is Miss Vance, our new teacher." "Welcome to Triple D, señorita," Rosa said warmly. "I have brought chicken stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. You eat, then sleep. Everything better in morning." After they left her alone, Willa sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the rapid change in her circumstances. That morning, she had faced abandonment and potential destitution. Now she was ensconced in comfort, with a position and what appeared to be the beginnings of a community that actually wanted her presence. And then there was Gabriel Dawson, with his steady gaze and quiet strength. The way he had said, "You're coming home," had affected her in ways she wasn't prepared to examine too closely. After washing up and changing into her nightdress, Willa ate the delicious meal Rosa had prepared, then slipped between the cool, clean sheets. Despite the unfamiliar surroundings, sleep claimed her almost immediately. Her last conscious thought a mixture of gratitude and trepidation about what the dawn would bring. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through curtains Willa had been too tired to close the night before. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was, then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She was at Triple D Ranch, miles from Eagle Pass, having accepted a position from a man she'd just met. A gentle knock at the door roused her fully. "Miss Vance, it's Dorothy." "I've brought coffee." Willa quickly pulled on her wrapper. "Please come in." Dorothy entered bearing a tray with coffee and what smelled like fresh-baked cinnamon rolls. "I thought you might appreciate breakfast in your room this morning. The men tend to be boisterous at the table." "How thoughtful, thank you." Willa accepted the steaming cup gratefully. "What time do you usually serve breakfast?" 6:30. "The hands eat in the bunkhouse, but family and the foreman eat in the dining room." Dorothy settled carefully on the edge of the bed. "Rosa will show you around after you've eaten. I thought you might like to see the schoolhouse this afternoon." After Dorothy left, Willa dressed in one of her plain work dresses, a deep blue cotton that had seen better days but was still presentable. She pinned her hair in its usual practical bun, splashed water on her face, and headed downstairs, determined to begin integrating herself into the rhythms of ranch life. The main floor of the house was larger than it had appeared in the dim lamplight of the previous evening. Besides the entrance hall, there was a formal parlor, a dining room that could easily seat 20, a well-stocked library that made Willa's heart leap with pleasure, and a large, airy kitchen where Rosa ruled supreme. "Ah, there she is," Rosa exclaimed when Willa entered the kitchen. "Did you sleep well, señorita? Are you hungry still? I can make eggs, fresh tortillas, the cinnamon roll was perfect, thank you," Willa assured her. "I was hoping to explore a bit if that's all right," Rosa beamed. "Of course, first I show you the house, then the yard." The patron, Mr. Gabriel, he wanted to show you the school himself when he returned from the north pasture. The yard turned out to be a complex of buildings surrounding the main house. A bunkhouse for the 20 or so cowboys who worked the ranch, a cookhouse where they took their meals, a blacksmith's forge, stables, multiple barns and storage buildings, and corrals of various sizes. Beyond these immediate structures, Willa could see cattle grazing on the rolling hills that seemed to extend forever. "It's enormous," she breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. Rosa nodded proudly. "Triple D is the best ranch in all of Texas." Mr. Henry, the patron's father, he built it from nothing. Now Mr. Gabriel make it even better. "Where is Mr. Henry now?" Willa asked. A shadow crossed Rosa's face. "He and the patrona, Mrs. Margaret, they die 3 winters ago. Fever, very sad." Mr. Gabriel was only 27, but he take over everything. He is a good man, like his father. As if summoned by their conversation, Gabriel Dawson rode into the yard at that moment, accompanied by several cowboys driving a small herd of cattle into one of the corrals. He spotted Willa and Rosa and lifted his hand in greeting before dismounting and issuing instructions to his men. Willa couldn't help but notice how different he looked in daylight. His tall frame was lean but powerful, his movements economical and assured. There was a natural authority in the way the other men deferred to him, though his manner with them was respectful rather than domineering. When he approached, removing his hat and running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair, Willa was struck by how handsome he was. His features were strong rather than refined, with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting a good humor that his current serious expression belied. "Miss Vance, I trust you slept well." His voice was, as she remembered, deep and clear, with the slightest drawl that marked him as Texan born and bred. "Very well, thank you. Rosa was just showing me the ranch." Willa felt oddly breathless under his direct gaze. "It's quite impressive." Gabriel's expression softened into something approaching a smile. "We're proud of it. If you're not too tired, I'd like to show you the schoolhouse now. We've been working on some improvements since Dorothy announced her condition." Rosa excused herself to return to her kitchen duties, and Willa found herself walking beside Gabriel toward a neat white building set about 50 yards behind the main house. "How many children attend the school?" she asked, wanting to focus on the professional aspects of her new position. 12 at present. 5 are my sister's children, 3 belong to my foreman, and the rest are from neighboring homesteads within riding distance." Gabriel opened the schoolhouse door, standing aside to let her enter first. Ages range from 5 to 15 with varying levels of prior education. The schoolhouse was a single large room with windows on all sides providing ample natural light. Rows of desks faced a teacher's desk and blackboard at the front, with a pot-bellied stove in the center for heating. Bookshelves lined the back wall, surprisingly well stocked for a frontier school. "My mother was particular about education," Gabriel explained, following her gaze to the books. "She taught us herself until we were old enough to be sent east for proper schooling. When ranch hands with families started settling here, she established this school." Willa ran her fingers along the spines of the book's classics, mathematics texts, histories, even some poetry collections. She had excellent taste in literature. "Oxford educated. My father met her while selling cattle in England." Pride and sorrow mingled in Gabriel's voice. "She never quite adjusted to Texas, but she made the best of it, created this little oasis of learning." "I'll do my best to honor her legacy," Willa promised. Deeply touched by the story, Gabriel studied her for a long moment. Judge Parker said you were from Boston. What brought you to Eagle Pass, if you don't mind my asking? Willa moved to one of the desks, running her hand along its smooth surface. After my fiancé died, I needed a fresh start. Teaching positions for women are limited in the East, but frontier towns are desperate for educators. Or so I thought, she gave a rueful smile. Eagle Pass seemed a good opportunity until the drought forced most families to leave. I'm sorry about your fiancé, Gabriel said quietly. It was 3 years ago. Willa squared her shoulders. I've made my peace with it. Gabriel nodded, respecting her obvious desire to change the subject. Classes run from 8 until 3 Monday through Friday. Dorothy can tell you more about the curriculum she's been following. The children bring their own lunches, but there's always coffee and water here for you. He showed her the supply closet, stocked with paper, slates, chalk, and other teaching materials, then led her outside again. A small bell hung beside the door. Ring this to start and end the school day, he explained. The children know to come when they hear it. As they walked back toward the main house, Willa found herself studying Gabriel surreptitiously. Despite his obvious wealth and position, there was nothing pretentious about him. He wore the same practical clothing as his ranch hands, though perhaps of slightly better quality, and his hands showed the calluses of a man who worked alongside his employees. Will I meet the children before Monday? She asked. At Sunday dinner. Everyone gathers here after church service. He glanced at her. We're not strict about attendance, but most folks around here find comfort in the ritual. You're welcome to join us, of course. I would like that, Willa replied, realizing she meant it. After months of loneliness in Eagle Pass, the prospect of community was deeply appealing. They had reached the house when one of the cowboys came running up, his expression urgent. Boss, Johnson's caught in the North Corral. Bulls got him pinned. Gabriel's demeanor changed instantly. Get Dr. Fleming, he ordered, then turned to Willa. Excuse me, Miss Vance, duty calls. Before she could respond, he was sprinting toward the stables, the cowboy at his heels. Within moments, they were galloping out of the yard, joined by several other men who had heard the commotion. Willa found herself standing alone, the abrupt transition leaving her momentarily adrift. Then, squaring her shoulders, she headed inside. If this was to be her home, she would need to accustom herself to the unpredictable rhythms and occasional dangers of ranch life. Dorothy was in the library, seated in a comfortable chair with her feet propped on a hassock, a ledger open on her swollen belly. She looked up when Willa entered. I heard the commotion. Another accident, Willa nodded. Someone named Johnson is trapped by a bull. Mr. Dawson and Dr. Fleming have gone to help, Dorothy sighed, closing the ledger. Third incident this month. That new Brahma bull Gabe bought is proving to be more trouble than he's worth. She patted the chair beside her. Come, sit with me. This may be our best chance for a proper conversation before the chaos resumes. Willa settled into the indicated chair, grateful for the opportunity to learn more about her new employer and the ranch. Your brother mentioned you have 5 children. Yes, though sometimes it feels like 50, Dorothy said with a laugh. Thomas is 15, nearly a man, then the twins, Sarah and Samuel, who are 12. Elizabeth is 8 and little Henry is 5. You'll meet them all tomorrow at dinner. And your husband has been the ranch doctor for how long? 10 years now. He came out to treat my father for pneumonia and never left. Dorothy's expression softened with memory. I think he fell in love with Triple D first, then me. And your brother, has he always run the ranch? Willa tried to keep her tone merely conversational. Dorothy gave her a knowing look. Gabe went to school at Yale, if you can believe it. Studied agriculture and business. Could have had his pick of positions back east, but he loved this land too much to stay away. When our parents died, he took over without hesitation. She shifted position, wincing slightly. He works too hard, though, carries the weight of everyone's welfare on his shoulders. He seems capable, Willa offered, unsure how else to characterize the man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. He's the best man I know, Dorothy said simply. Stubborn as a mule and sometimes too serious for his own good, but I couldn't ask for a better brother. She tilted her head, studying Willa. Now, tell me more about yourself. Gabe mentioned you're from Boston. For the next hour, the two women talked easily, forming the beginnings of what Willa hoped might become a genuine friendship. Dorothy was intelligent and forthright, with a wry sense of humor that made Willa laugh more than she had in months. By the time Rosa called them for lunch, Willa felt as if she'd known the other woman much longer than mere hours. They were finishing their meal when they heard riders entering the yard. Dorothy moved to the window, her expression anxious until she spotted her husband dismounting. "They're back. James looks tired but not upset, so I don't think Johnson's injuries are life-threatening." A few minutes later, James entered the dining room, his clothes dusty and a smear of what looked like blood on one sleeve. "Johnson will live," he announced, dropping into a chair. "3 broken ribs and a nasty gash on his thigh, but nothing that won't heal." "And the bull?" Dorothy asked. "Still alive, much to my regret." James accepted the glass of water Rosa brought him. Gabe refused to put it down, said it's just doing what bulls do. He's having the men build a separate pen for it, away from the regular corrals. Willa, feeling like an intruder on a family discussion, began to rise. "I should let you stay," James said kindly. "You're part of the household now. Besides, I want to hear how you're finding Triple D so far." Before Willa could answer, Gabriel appeared in the doorway, looking considerably more disheveled than when she'd last seen him. There was a tear in his shirt, and a darkening bruise on his jaw suggested he'd had his own encounter with the troublesome bull. "Johnson's settled in the bunkhouse," he reported. "Miguel and Lewis are sitting with him." Dorothy frowned at her brother's appearance. "Did that beast get you too?" Gabriel touched his jaw ruefully. "Not the bull." "Johnson was delirious with pain, took a swing at me when I was trying to hold him still for James." "Sit down before you fall down," his sister ordered. "Rosa, bring Mr. Gabriel a plate and some coffee, strong coffee." As Gabriel took a seat opposite Willa, their eyes met briefly. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch, though she couldn't have explained why. There was something compelling about this man who had charged into danger for one of his workers without hesitation. "Miss Vance was just about to tell us how she's finding Triple D," James said, breaking the moment. Willa gathered her composure. "Everyone has been most welcoming. The schoolhouse is better equipped than the one in Eagle Pass, and I'm looking forward to meeting my students." Gabriel nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Good, we want you to be comfortable here." "She will be," Dorothy declared with certainty. "Willa and I have decided we're going to be great friends, haven't we?" The use of her nickname startled Willa, but pleasantly so. "I would like that very much." The rest of the meal passed in easy conversation, with James recounting some of the more amusing medical situations he'd encountered on the ranch, and Dorothy sharing stories of the children Willa would soon be teaching. Gabriel said little, but Willa noticed how his expression softened when his family laughed, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners despite his obvious fatigue. After lunch, Dorothy insisted on resting, and James accompanied her upstairs. Willa found herself momentarily alone with Gabriel, an awkwardness descending that hadn't been present in the schoolhouse earlier. "I hope you'll be happy here, Miss Vance," he said finally, his voice low and sincere. "I believe I will," Willa replied, surprised to find she meant it. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Dawson," he smiled then, a real smile that transformed his serious face. "Gabriel, please, or Gabe, if you prefer. Mr. Dawson makes me look for my father." "Then you must call me Willa," she offered in return. "Only my students call me Miss Vance." "Willa," he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name. "It suits you better than Wilhelmina." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken when Rosa entered to clear the table. Gabriel rose, excusing himself to check on Johnson and attend to the afternoon's work. Willa watched him go, aware of an inexplicable sense of loss at his departure. That evening, Willa sat in the library, a book open on her lap but her mind elsewhere. The day had been full of new impressions and adjustments. Everyone she'd met had been kind, yet she still felt like an outsider looking in on a close-knit family. The sound of the front door opening and closing, followed by heavy footsteps in the hall, alerted her to Gabriel's return. He appeared in the library doorway, looking cleaner but no less tired than earlier. "I thought everyone had retired for the evening," he said, clearly surprised to find her there. "I'm not quite ready for sleep," Willa explained. "Your mother's library is too tempting." Gabriel entered, moving to the shelf that held a crystal decanter and glasses. Would you mind company? I could use a nightcap after today. Please join me, Willa said, gesturing to the chair across from hers. How is Mr. Johnson? Gabriel poured a small measure of amber liquid into a glass. Resting comfortably thanks to James's laudanum. He'll be out of commission for a few weeks. He lifted the decanter questioningly toward her. No, thank you, I never acquired the taste for spirits. He settled into the chair, taking a sip of his drink. May I ask what you're reading? Willa showed him the cover. Thoreau's Walden. I find his observations on solitude particularly relevant to frontier life. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, Gabriel quoted softly. To front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach. Surprised, Willa regarded him with new interest. You've read Thoreau? My mother insisted on a well-rounded education, he replied with a small smile. Though I confess I prefer Whitman. I am large, I contain multitudes. A man of unexpected depths, Willa observed, then blushed at her own forwardness. Gabriel's eyes darkened slightly. Most people are once you take the time to know them. The quiet intimacy of the moment stretched between them, charged with something Willa wasn't ready to name. She broke the gaze first, looking down at her book. I should probably retire, she said, though part of her wanted to stay to continue this unexpected conversation. Tomorrow will be busy, I imagine, Gabriel nodded, rising when she did. I'll walk you to your room. They climbed the stairs in companionable silence, pausing when they reached her door. Thank you for bringing me here, Willa said softly. I don't know what would have become of me if you hadn't arrived at that schoolhouse. Gabriel's expression was unreadable in the dim hallway. Judge Parker said you needed help. I'm glad I was in a position to offer it. Still, it was a kindness, one I won't forget. He inclined his head slightly. Good night, Willa. Sleep well. Good night, Gabriel. As she closed her door, Willa leaned against it, her heart beating faster than the brief exchange warranted. Whatever was happening, whatever this pull toward Gabriel Dawson might mean, it was too soon to examine it closely. She had a new position, a new home, and tomorrow, new responsibilities. That was more than enough to occupy her thoughts for now. Sunday dawned clear and warm, the kind of autumn day that hinted at summer's lingering presence while promising winter's approach. Willa dressed with care in her best dress, a forest green wool that brought out the amber flecks in her hazel eyes. She twisted her hair into a more elaborate style than her usual practical bun, wanting to make a good impression on the families she would meet at church. The Triple D contingent traveled to Eagle Pass in 3 wagons, Gabriel driving one with Willa, Dorothy, and James. The ranch foreman, Michael Reeves, driving another with his wife and 3 children, and the remaining hands who wished to attend following in the third. The children, including Dorothy's 5, had been distributed among the wagons, their excited chatter filling the morning air. Usually we'd ride horseback, Gabriel explained as they set off, but with Dorothy's condition and your trunk still being in town, wagons made more sense. The church in Eagle Pass was a simple white painted building with a modest steeple. As they arrived, Willa was surprised to see how many people were gathering, far more than she would have expected given the exodus she'd witnessed. Ranchers and homesteaders come from miles around, James explained, noting her expression. Sunday service is as much about community as worship out here. Inside, the church was nearly full, with families settling into pews and greeting neighbors. Gabriel led their group to a pew near the front, where several people immediately approached to welcome Willa. Word travels fast, Dorothy whispered with a smile. Everyone knows you're our new teacher. The service itself was straightforward and mercifully brief, given the heat already building in the crowded space. The minister, Reverend Thompson, made a point of welcoming Willa publicly, asking God's blessing on her work with the children of the community. Afterward, there was what amounted to an impromptu social gathering in the churchyard. Willa was introduced to so many people she had no hope of remembering all their names, but she did her best to pay special attention to the parents of her future students. Miss Vance, a familiar voice called, and Willa turned to see Judge Parker approaching, his thin frame as erect as ever despite his advanced years. Judge Parker, she greeted him warmly. I owe you a debt of gratitude. Mr. Dawson told me you were responsible for my rescue. The elderly judge smiled, his eyes twinkling beneath bushy white brows. Merely put the right people in contact, my dear. When I heard the town committee had abandoned you, I was appalled. Fortunately, I knew the Dawsons were in need of a teacher. He glanced toward Gabriel, who was deep in conversation with several ranchers nearby. A fortuitous arrangement for all concerned, I think. Before Willa could respond, Dorothy appeared at her elbow. Judge, you must come meet my newest niece or nephew in a few weeks. James says any day now. As they chatted, Willa found her attention drawn repeatedly to Gabriel. He moved with easy confidence among the churchgoers, clearly respected by all. Several young women, Willa noticed, seemed particularly eager for his attention, though he treated them all with the same polite courtesy. He's quite the eligible bachelor, a voice observed beside her, and Willa turned to find Mrs. Reeves, the foreman's wife, watching her with knowing eyes. Every unmarried woman within 50 miles has set her cap for him since his parents passed. I'm sure Mr. Dawson has no shortage of admirers, Willa replied carefully. Mrs. Reeves' Sarah, Willa recalled, smiled. None that have caught his interest so far. He's married to that ranch, my Michael says. She patted Willa's arm. Anyway, we're all delighted to have you at Triple D. My Jenny's been pestering me about when school would start again. She loves her books almost as much as her horse. By the time they loaded up to return to the ranch, Willa's head was spinning with names, faces, and snippets of local history and gossip. Gabriel had retrieved her trunk from the Eagle Pass schoolhouse, securing it in the back of their wagon. I think that went well, he commented as they drove homeward, the children having rearranged themselves so that Dorothy's youngest two were now riding with them. You made quite an impression. Everyone has been very welcoming, Willa said, smiling as little Henry Dawson Fleming climbed onto her lap without invitation. Hello there, young man. Are you really going to be our teacher? The boy asked, studying her face seriously. I am indeed, Willa confirmed. And what do you like to learn about, Henry? Horses, he declared without hesitation, and cowboys and Indians and monsters. Gabriel laughed, the sound warming Willa inexplicably. Practical subjects for a Texas boy. Perhaps we can incorporate horses into your arithmetic lessons, Willa suggested. Would that make counting more interesting? Henry considered this, then nodded solemnly. I guess so, as long as there are horses. By the time they reached Triple D, it was early afternoon. Rosa had prepared a feast that would serve as both dinner and supper, allowing the ranch hands to return to their duties afterward while the family and guests lingered over dessert and coffee. The dining room was filled to capacity, with extra chairs brought in to accommodate everyone. Willa found herself seated between Gabriel at the head of the table and Thomas, Dorothy's eldest son, a serious young man who reminded her strongly of his uncle. Aunt Dorothy says you're from Boston, Thomas said as the platters were passed around. Is it true they have streetcars pulled by horses there? They do, Willa confirmed, and gaslight on many streets. It's quite different from Texas. Do you miss it? Gabriel asked quietly. Willa considered the question. I miss certain conveniences. And the change of seasons autumn in New England is spectacular, but Boston never felt like it could be home after Richard, my fiancé, died. And does Texas feel like it could be home? The question seemed weighted with meaning beyond simple curiosity. Willa met his gaze. I'm beginning to think it might. Something flickered in Gabriel's eyes, pleasure, perhaps, or relief, before he turned to respond to a question from Michael Reeves about the cattle they'd moved to the north pasture. The afternoon passed pleasantly, with the children gradually excused to play outside while the adults continued their conversations. Willa learned more about ranch operations than she had ever thought to know, fascinated despite herself by the complexities of raising cattle on such a scale. As twilight approached, the guests began to depart, each family stopping to welcome Willa once more and express enthusiasm for the resumption of classes the following day. The Reeves children, Jenny, Robert, and William, promised to show her their favorite books, while Dorothy's children extracted a promise that she would let them help decorate the schoolhouse for the upcoming Thanksgiving celebration. After the last wagon had departed, the family retreated to the parlor. James played the piano while Dorothy sang, her clear soprano filling the room with old folk songs and hymns. Eventually, the children were sent to bed, with Henry insisting that Willa herself read his bedtime story. "He's taken a shine to you," Gabriel observed when she returned downstairs. "That's a good sign." "He's a charming boy," Willa replied. "All your nieces and nephews seem bright and engaging. Dorothy and James are excellent parents." Gabriel hesitated, then added, "Our father was often too busy with the ranch to spend much time with us. I've always admired how James balances his duties as a doctor with his family responsibilities." The conversation drifted to Willa's plans for her first day of teaching, with Dorothy offering suggestions based on her experience with the children. As the evening wore on, Willa found herself increasingly aware of Gabriel's presence, the timbre of his voice, the way his hands moved as he spoke, the occasional glances he sent her way when he thought she wasn't looking. When she finally excused herself to prepare for the next day, Gabriel accompanied her to the stairs. "I probably won't see you before you begin teaching tomorrow," he said. "The men and I will be moving cattle to the southern pastures at dawn." "I understand," Willa assured him. "Ranch work doesn't pause for new school teachers," Gabriel smiled. "No, but it's made more meaningful by them." He hesitated, then added, "I hope your first day goes well, Willa." "Thank you, Gabriel." She began to ascend the stairs, then turned back. "For everything," his expression softened. "Good night." Willa lay awake longer than she intended that night, her mind buzzing with preparations for her first day and reflections on how drastically her circumstances had changed. 1 week ago, she had been teaching a dwindling number of students in Eagle Pass, increasingly anxious about her future. Now she was installed in a comfortable room in a prosperous ranch house with a secure position and the beginnings of genuine friendships. And then there was Gabriel Dawson, a man unlike any she had ever known. Reserved yet kind, educated yet practical, carrying the responsibility of many lives with quiet strength. Willa was not naive enough to misinterpret her growing awareness of him. She was attracted to the rancher, perhaps more than was wise given her position in his household. She finally drifted off to sleep with the image of his smile in her mind, telling herself firmly that professional gratitude and natural admiration were perfectly reasonable responses to her benefactor. Nothing more. Monday morning dawned with a crispness that suggested autumn was finally asserting itself. Willa dressed in one of her plain teaching dresses, a dark blue with white collar and cuffs, and made her way downstairs to find Dorothy already at the breakfast table despite the early hour. "Couldn't sleep," Dorothy explained, rubbing her swollen belly. "This little one has decided that my ribs make an excellent footrest." "Is there anything I can do?" Willa asked, concerned by the shadows under the other woman's eyes. Dorothy waved off her concern. "Just normal end-of-pregnancy discomforts. James says another week at most." She pushed a plate of biscuits toward Willa. "Eat up. Teaching requires energy, and these children will test every ounce of patience you possess." After breakfast, Willa made her way to the schoolhouse, wanting time to familiarize herself with Dorothy's lesson plans and organize her thoughts before the children arrived. The morning air was cool and fresh, the sky a clear blue that seemed to stretch forever. In the distance, she could see riders moving cattle across the hills. Gabriel and his men beginning their day's work. The schoolhouse was just as she remembered, though now she took more time to examine the teaching materials available. Dorothy had left detailed notes on each student's progress and abilities, along with suggestions for grouping them during lessons to maximize learning time. At precisely 8 o'clock, Willa rang the bell that hung outside the schoolhouse door. Within minutes, children began arriving, some on foot from the main house and nearby buildings, others on horseback from more distant homes. "Good morning," she greeted them as they filed in. "I'm Miss Vance, your new teacher. Please find your usual seats and we'll begin with introductions." The children, ranging from little Henry at 5 to Thomas at 15, regarded her with expressions varying from curiosity to shy enthusiasm. She had them stand one by one to state their names, and something they enjoyed learning about, making mental notes about each child's demeanor and confidence level. Jenny Reeves, a bright-eyed 11-year-old, raised her hand immediately after introductions. "Miss Vance, Aunt Dorothy always let us start the day with a song. Can we still do that?" Willa smiled. "I think that's a lovely tradition. What song shall we sing?" By mid-morning, Willa had established a rhythm with her students. The older children worked independently on mathematics or composition, while she helped the younger ones with their letters and numbers. When attention began to flag, she organized a quick game that involved learning while moving around the room, burning off some of their restless energy. At noon, the children scattered to eat their packed lunches in the shade of nearby oak trees. Willa remained in the schoolhouse, reviewing her plans for the afternoon and making notes on each child's progress and needs. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the approaching footsteps until a shadow fell across her desk. Looking up, she found Gabriel standing in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "I was checking how your first day is going." "Very well, I think," Willa replied, surprised and pleased by his interest. "Your nieces and nephews are delightful, and the Reeves children are quite advanced for their ages." Gabriel moved further into the room, glancing around at the evidence of the morning's activities: arithmetic problems on the blackboard, geography maps spread across one table, a timeline of American history beginning to take shape on the back wall. "Dorothy said you'd be a natural teacher," he commented. "She seems to have been right." Willa felt herself blush at the compliment. "I love seeing children discover new ideas. It's the most rewarding part of teaching." Gabriel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "My mother used to say that education was the greatest gift we could offer the next generation. That knowledge, once gained, could never be taken away." "A wise woman," Willa observed. "I wish I could have known her." "She would have liked you," Gabriel said with certainty. "She valued intelligence and courage. You have both in abundance." Before Willa could respond to this unexpected compliment, the door burst open and several children tumbled in, eager to show her a horned toad they'd discovered during their lunch break. Gabriel stepped back, allowing them to crowd around Willa's desk with their find. "I should let you get back to your teaching," he said, settling his hat back on his head. "I'm glad things are going well." Willa looked up from the children's excited explanations. "Thank you for checking on us." His smile was warm. "My pleasure." As he left, Willa found herself watching his retreating figure through the window, something fluttering in her chest that had nothing to do with the excitement of her first day of teaching. The remainder of the afternoon passed quickly, with Willa introducing a simple science experiment that had even the oldest children engaged and curious. By the time the final bell rang at 3 o'clock, she was tired but deeply satisfied with her first day. The children dispersed, some to chores, others to play, and a few staying behind to ask additional questions about the day's lessons. Thomas Fleming lingered longest, finally approaching her desk with a book in his hands. "My uncle said you might enjoy this," he said, offering her a leather-bound volume of Whitman's Leaves of Grass. "It's his personal copy, but he said you could borrow it for as long as you like." Willa accepted the book, touched by the gesture. "That's very kind. Please thank him for me." Thomas nodded. "Uncle Gabe reads a lot, even though he doesn't have much time for it. He says books keep his mind from getting as calloused as his hands." After Thomas left, Willa sat alone in the quiet schoolhouse, turning the Whitman volume in her hands. The book fell open naturally to Song of Myself, and she noticed pencil marks in the margins: Gabriel's thoughts and reactions, shared now with her in this intimate literary conversation. That evening at dinner, Willa thanked Gabriel for the loan of the book. "I've only had time to glance through it, but I'm looking forward to reading your annotations." "They're probably nonsensical," Gabriel replied with a self-deprecating smile, "just the musings of a rancher trying to make sense of Whitman's cosmos." "On the contrary," Willa countered. "Your note on the passage about contradictions was quite insightful. I had never considered that interpretation." A pleased expression crossed Gabriel's face, quickly masked as he turned to respond to a question from James. But throughout the meal, Willa caught him glancing her way, as if seeing her in a new light. Later, After the children had gone to bed and James had taken Dorothy upstairs to rest, Gabriel invited Willa to join him for a walk around the ranch yard. The night was clear and cool, with stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. The children spoke highly of their first day with you, he told her as they strolled past the corrals. Even Thomas, who's usually sparing with praise. I'm glad, Willa said. They're wonderful students. You and Dorothy have created something special here with this school. They walked in companionable silence for a while, their path illuminated by the nearly full moon. In the distance, a coyote howled, answered by another farther away. It's so vast, Willa murmured, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. In Boston, you're always aware of being surrounded by humanity. Here, it's possible to believe you're the only people for 100 miles. It can be lonely, Gabriel acknowledged. Or it can be freeing, depending on your perspective. Which is it for you? He considered the question seriously. Both at different times. After my parents died, the open space felt empty, echoing. Now, most days, it feels like possibility. He glanced at her. What about you? Does all this space frighten you? Willa shook her head. No, it reminds me how small my troubles really are in the grand scheme of things. That's comforting in a way. They had circled back to the house, but neither seemed eager to end their conversation. Instead, they settled onto the porch steps, looking out at the night. May I ask you something personal? Gabriel said after a moment. You may ask. I reserve the right not to answer, Willa replied with a small smile. Fair enough. He turned slightly to face her. What happened to your fiancé? If it's not too painful to discuss. Willa drew a deep breath. It had been so long since she'd spoken of Richard to anyone. He was an engineer at a textile mill. There was an accident, a new machine malfunctioned during testing. He and 2 others were killed instantly. I'm sorry, Gabriel said softly. We had been engaged for just 2 months. Willa's voice was steady, the grief long since transmuted into a dull ache rather than the sharp pain of fresh loss. Afterward, Boston felt haunted. Everywhere I looked, I saw places we had been together, plans we had made. So you came west. Yes, my father thought I was mad to accept a teaching position in Texas, of all places, but I needed the distance, the change. She smiled faintly. I needed to be somewhere Richard had never been, where I could be Wilhelmina Vance, not Richard's poor fiancée. Gabriel nodded, understanding in his eyes. After my parents died, many people expected me to sell the ranch and return east, where I'd been educated, but this land is part of me. I couldn't leave, even though every corner held memories of them. How did you manage the grief? Willa asked, recognizing a kindred spirit in loss, one day at a time. Focusing on the ranch, the people who depended on me, and gradually the memories became less painful. He looked out at the starlit ranch. Now I can think of them with gratitude rather than sorrow most days. They sat in silence for a while, the shared understanding between them deepening. Finally, Gabriel stood, offering Willa his hand to help her up. It's getting late, he said. And you have another day of molding young minds tomorrow. Willa placed her hand in his, allowing him to draw her to her feet. For a moment they stood close, their hands still joined, and Willa was acutely aware of his height, his strength, the warmth of his skin against hers. Thank you for the walk, she said, her voice softer than she'd intended. And the conversation. Gabriel released her hand slowly. Thank you for listening. It's been a long time since I've spoken about them. As they entered the house, the comfortable intimacy of their exchange lingered, a connection forming between them that went beyond employer and employee, beyond even friendship. Willa wasn't ready to name it, but she felt it nonetheless a recognition, a possibility, a beginning. The next 2 weeks established a pattern to Willa's days at Triple D Ranch. Mornings were devoted to teaching, afternoons to helping students with individual projects or preparing lessons, and evenings to dinner with the family, followed by reading or conversation in the library. Gabriel was often absent during the day, the demands of the ranch keeping him in the saddle from dawn until dusk. But he made a point of checking on the schoolhouse at least every other day, sometimes bringing specimens for science lessons, interesting rocks, bird feathers, once even a small harmless snake in a glass jar that delighted the boys and horrified several of the girls. Willa found herself looking forward to these visits, the highlight of her teaching day. Gabriel never stayed long, but his interest in the children's progress and his occasional contributions to their discussions showed a mind as sharp as any Boston intellectual, despite his frontier lifestyle. In the evenings, when schedules permitted, they often found themselves alone in the library after the others had retired, discussing books or ranch business or Willa's observations about her students. These conversations gradually expanded to include more personal topics: childhood memories, hopes for the future, philosophical questions that revealed the depth of thought behind Gabriel's quiet exterior. On a particularly clear night, Gabriel invited Willa to the roof of the main house where he had set up a small telescope. "My father brought this back from a trip to New York," he explained as he adjusted the instrument. "He loved showing us the stars, teaching us the constellations." Willa bent to look through the telescope, gasping at the clarity of the moon's surface. "It's extraordinary. I've never seen it so clearly." Gabriel stood close behind her, his voice low near her ear as he pointed out features of the lunar landscape. Willa was intensely aware of his proximity, the subtle scent of soap and leather that seemed uniquely his. When she straightened, they were face to face, barely a handspan between them. For one breathless moment, Willa thought he might kiss her, wanted him to kiss her. She realized with startling clarity. Instead, Gabriel stepped back, clearing his throat. "There's Jupiter," he said, pointing to a bright point in the sky. "With the telescope, you can sometimes see its moons." The moment passed, but its impact lingered. Something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of attraction that neither was quite ready to address directly. The following Sunday, church service was held at Triple D rather than in town, a common practice when weather threatened or, as in this case, when a family member was too close to delivery to travel safely. Dorothy, now uncomfortable and impatient for her baby's arrival, had insisted the service continue as planned. "I refuse to be the reason anyone misses their weekly dose of righteousness," she declared when James suggested canceling. So the parlor was rearranged with chairs in rows, and Reverend Thompson made the journey from Eagle Pass to conduct the service. Neighbors from surrounding ranches and homesteads arrived throughout the morning, until the house was filled with nearly 40 people, their voices raised together in hymns that made the windows vibrate. After the service, as people mingled and shared the communal meal that followed, Willa found herself cornered by Eliza Simmons, a widow from a nearby ranch whose interest in Gabriel was apparent to everyone except, perhaps, Gabriel himself. "Miss Vance," Eliza greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I understand you're settling in well at Triple D." "Very well, thank you," Willa replied politely. "The children are a joy to teach. How fortunate that Gabriel found you when he did," Eliza continued. "Such a coincidence that Judge Parker knew of your situation just when Dorothy needed assistance." There was something in her tone that suggested more than casual interest in the circumstances of Willa's arrival. Before she could respond, Gabriel appeared at her side, a plate of food in his hand. "Miss Simmons," he nodded to Eliza, "I see you've met our new teacher." "We were just discussing what a happy accident brought her to Triple D," Eliza said, her smile now directed fully at Gabriel. "Such good fortune for everyone." "Not an accident at all," Gabriel replied calmly. "Judge Parker has excellent judgment in people. He knew Miss Vance would be perfect for our school." He turned to Willa. "Dorothy is asking for you, something about the children's Thanksgiving recitations." Grateful for the excuse, Willa excused herself, aware of Eliza's narrowed gaze following her as she moved through the crowded room to where Dorothy sat in a comfortable chair, surrounded by several other women. "You looked like you needed rescuing," Dorothy murmured when Willa joined them. "Eliza can be rather intense." "Thank you," Willa replied quietly, "though I feel I've interrupted your conversation." "Nonsense. We were just discussing baby names," one of the women, Mrs. Abernathy, Willa recalled, said cheerfully. "Dorothy refuses to commit to any before seeing the child." "Names should suit the individual," Dorothy insisted. "How can I know what suits him or her before we've been properly introduced?" The conversation continued in this vein, with Willa gradually relaxing into the circle of women, many of whom had children in her school. They treated her with a warmth and inclusion she hadn't experienced in Eagle Pass, where she had always felt like an outsider. Later, as the gathering dispersed, Gabriel found her helping Rosa clean up in the kitchen. "I apologize for Eliza," he said without preamble. "She can be somewhat territorial." Willa raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware I was encroaching on her territory." A flush crept up Gabriel's neck. "You're not. That is, Triple D isn't her territory. She seems to think. That is, she has expressed interest in." He stopped, clearly uncomfortable. "In you?" Willa suggested, unable to suppress a smile at his discomfort. "Yes," Gabriel admitted, "though I've given her no encouragement." "You don't need to explain your personal matters to me, Mr. Dawson," Willa said, returning to the formal address deliberately. Gabriel's expression became serious. "I think perhaps I do, Miss Vance." He glanced around the kitchen, where Rosa and several other women were still working. "Would you walk with me, just to the corral and back?" Outside, the autumn afternoon was beginning to cool, the sun slanting toward the western hills. They walked in silence until they reached the main corral, where several horses dozed in the late-day sun. "Eliza Simmons has made it clear she would welcome my attentions," Gabriel said finally. "She's a good woman, competent, knowledgeable about ranch life. She seems very determined," Willa offered, unsure where this conversation was headed. "She is, but I have no interest in her, romantic or otherwise." Gabriel turned to face Willa directly. "I want to be clear about that because I don't want you to misunderstand my intentions." Willa's heart began to beat faster. "Your intentions?" Gabriel took a deep breath. "Willa, in the short time you've been at Triple D, you've become important to me, more than I expected, more than might be proper, given that I'm technically your employer." "I see," Willa said softly, hope and apprehension mingling in her chest. "I don't want to presume," Gabriel continued, his usual confidence giving way to uncertainty. "You're still relatively new to Texas, still establishing yourself, and I know you've suffered a great loss, but I hoped. That is, I wondered if you might consider allowing me to court you properly, with respect and patience." The directness of his proposal took Willa's breath away. In Boston, courtship was a dance of subtle signals and careful negotiations through family intermediaries. Here was Gabriel Dawson, laying his heart open with straightforward honesty. "I would like that very much," she heard herself say, her voice steadier than she felt. Relief and joy transformed Gabriel's face. "You would?" Willa nodded, suddenly sure. "Yes. Though I agree we should proceed with care, for the children's sake and to avoid gossip that might affect the school or your standing in the community." "Of course," Gabriel agreed immediately. "We'll be discreet. Take our time." He reached for her hand, holding it gently between both of his. "Thank you, Willa." The warmth of his hands around hers, the sincerity in his eyes, Willa felt something within her shift and settle, as if a piece long missing had finally found its place. It was too soon to call it love, perhaps, but it was a beginning full of promise. They walked back to the house hand in hand, releasing their grip only when they came within view of the windows. But something had changed between them, a commitment made and acknowledged, a path forward opening before them. That evening, as Willa prepared for bed, she found herself humming a tune from the morning service, a lightness in her heart she hadn't felt since before Richard's death. Whatever happened next, she was no longer adrift. She had found not just a position or a home, but a possibility for a future filled with purpose and perhaps with love. The next morning dawned gray and threatening, with clouds rolling in from the west that promised the first significant rainfall in months. Willa hurried to the schoolhouse early, wanting to ensure the roof was secure and the windows properly closed against the coming storm. She was checking the last window when she heard a cry from the direction of the main house, not of pain, but of urgency. Racing outside, she saw James sprinting across the yard toward the bunkhouse, his medical bag in hand. "What's happening?" she called after him. "Dorothy's time has come," he shouted back without slowing. "I need my surgical instruments from the bunkhouse." Willa gathered her skirts and ran to the main house, where she found Rosa directing several ranch hands in boiling water and preparing clean linens. Gabriel was pacing the entrance hall, his face tight with concern. "Is there anything I can do?" Willa asked him. Gabriel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of agitation. Dorothy's asking for you. She says she wants a woman who isn't afraid of a little screaming." Upstairs, Willa found Dorothy already in the throes of active labor, her face flushed and hair damp with sweat. When she saw Willa, she reached out a hand. "Thank God," she gasped between contractions. "Rosa's wonderful, but she gets hysterical at the first sign of blood. I need someone steady." "I'm here," Willa assured her, taking her hand. "What can I do?" "Just stay," Dorothy managed before another contraction seized her, causing her to grip Willa's hand with surprising strength. For the next several hours, as rain began to pound against the windows and thunder rolled across the plains, Willa remained at Dorothy's side. She wiped her brow, helped her change positions as James directed, and murmured encouragement through the most difficult contractions. James worked with the calm efficiency of a man who had delivered many babies, both human and animal, but Willa could see the worry in his eyes as labor progressed. "The baby's positioned awkwardly," he explained quietly during a brief lull. "It's making things harder than they should be." Outside the bedroom door, Willa could hear Gabriel's footsteps as he paced the hallway, unable to help but unwilling to go far from his sister. As afternoon turned to evening with no sign of the baby's arrival, Dorothy's strength began to flag. Her grip on Willa's hand weakened, her cries becoming more whimpers than screams. "Talk to me," she begged Willa between contractions. "Distract me, tell me about you and Gabe." Willa blushed, glancing at James, who was too focused on his medical duties to pay attention to their conversation. "What do you mean?" Dorothy managed a weak smile. "Don't play innocent. I've seen how you look at each other. The conversations in the library that last until midnight. He's smitten, and unless I'm very much mistaken, so are you." Before Willa could respond, another contraction began, longer and more intense than the ones before. Dorothy cried out, her back arching off the bed. "This is it," James announced, positioning himself at the foot of the bed. "Dorothy, on the next one, I need you to push with everything you have left." What followed was a blur of intense effort, Dorothy's desperate pushing, James's calm instructions, and finally, the wail of a newborn filling the room. "A boy," James announced, his voice thick with emotion as he laid the squalling infant on Dorothy's chest. "A healthy son." Dorothy laughed through her tears, cradling the tiny red face. "Hello, little one, we've been waiting for you." Willa stepped back, suddenly feeling like an intruder on this intimate family moment. She slipped quietly from the room, finding Gabriel still in the hallway, his expression tense until he saw her smile. "A boy," she told him. "Mother and child both well." The relief that washed over his face was palpable. "Thank God," he breathed, and then, to her surprise, he pulled her into a swift, fierce embrace. "And thank you for being with her." Willa allowed herself to lean into his strength for a moment, the emotional intensity of the day catching up with her. "She did all the work," she murmured against his chest. "I just held her hand." Gabriel drew back slightly, his hands still on her shoulders, his eyes searching her face. Sometimes holding a hand is the most important thing one person can do for another. The tenderness in his gaze made Willa's breath catch. Standing there in the dimly lit hallway, with rain still drumming against the windows and the distant cry of a newborn reminding them of life's precious fragility, it seemed the most natural thing in the world when Gabriel lowered his head and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, respectful yet unmistakably passionate, his lips warm and sure against hers. Willa found herself responding instinctively, her hands moving to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they broke apart, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers for a moment. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted softly. "I've been hoping you would," Willa confessed, a smile curving her lips. Gabriel straightened, a matching smile spreading across his face. "Really, really." The moment was interrupted by James calling Gabriel's name from the bedroom doorway. "Come meet your new nephew." With a look that promised continued conversation, Gabriel followed his brother-in-law into the room where his sister and new nephew waited. Willa made her way downstairs, her lips still tingling from Gabriel's kiss, her heart full of a joy that seemed too big to contain. Outside, the storm was beginning to abate, the rain softening to a gentle patter against the windows. It seemed appropriate, somehow new life, new beginnings, the promise of clearer skies ahead. In the kitchen, she found Rosa preparing a light meal for the new parents and anyone else who might be hungry after the day's events. A boy, see. The housekeeper asked, her face wreathed in smiles when Willa nodded. Gracias a Dios, the patron will be pleased. He loves children, Mr. Gabriel. He should have his own, but first he needs a wife. She gave Willa a knowing look. Perhaps soon, eh? Willa felt herself blushing again, but didn't contradict the older woman. It was far too soon to think of such things, of course, but the seed of possibility had been planted with that kiss, with the understanding that had been growing between them these past weeks. Later that evening, after Dorothy and the baby were settled comfortably and the household had calmed, Willa found herself once again in the library with Gabriel. The rain had stopped completely, leaving a washed, clean quality to the night air that drifted through the partially open window. James says they're naming him Michael Gabriel Fleming, Gabriel told her, pride evident in his voice. After Dorothy's husband's father and, well, me. A fine name, Willa agreed, settling into what had become her chair near the fireplace. He'll be strong and kind with such examples to follow. Gabriel studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. You were remarkable today. Not many women would have stayed through such a difficult birth. Willa shrugged slightly. Dorothy needed me. It was as simple as that. Simple, but not easy. Gabriel moved to sit in the chair opposite hers. It made me think about what kind of woman I want in my life. Someone strong enough to face difficult moments without flinching, compassionate enough to put others' needs before her own comfort. Willa felt her heartbeat quicken at the direction of his words. Gabriel, I know it's too soon, he said quickly. I'm not proposing marriage, Willa, not yet, but today reminded me how precious life is, how quickly everything can change. I don't want to waste time pretending I'm not certain of what I feel for you. And what do you feel? Willa asked softly. Gabriel leaned forward, taking her hands in his. I believe I'm falling in love with you, Wilhelmina Vance. More than that, I believe we could build a good life together if you're willing to consider it. The directness of his declaration took her breath away. In the short time she had known him, Willa had come to expect such honesty from Gabriel Dawson, but it still had the power to surprise her. I have considered it, she admitted. More than I perhaps should have, given how recently we met. But there's something between us, Gabriel, something I haven't felt before, not even with Richard. Hope blazed in Gabriel's eyes. Does that mean? It means I believe I'm falling in love with you too, Willa said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. And that I'm willing to see where this leads us, however slowly we need to take it. Gabriel's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to each palm that sent shivers up her arms. That's all I ask. Time and the chance to show you what kind of life we could build together. In that moment, with the scent of rain-washed earth drifting through the window, and the man who had so unexpectedly entered her life looking at her with such tender promise, Willa felt the last lingering shadows of her past begin to recede. The future stretching before her was uncertain, as all futures must be, but for the first time in years, she looked toward it with hope rather than trepidation. Over the next few weeks, as autumn deepened toward winter, life at Triple D settled into a new rhythm. Dorothy recovered quickly from the birth, though she remained content to let Willa continue teaching while she focused on her expanding family. Baby Michael thrived, bringing joy to everyone in the household with his healthy lungs and increasingly alert gaze. Willa and Gabriel's courtship progressed quietly, conducted mostly in private conversations after the household retired and occasional rides around the ranch when Gabriel could spare time from his duties. They had agreed to keep their relationship discreet until they were more certain of its future direction, though Willa suspected Dorothy and James were well aware of the developing attachment between them. Thanksgiving approached, bringing preparations for the annual Triple D celebration that would include not only the immediate household, but also many of the neighboring families. Willa's students practiced recitations and songs to perform for their parents, while Rosa planned an elaborate feast that would showcase the ranch's abundance. The day before the celebration, Gabriel found Willa in the schoolhouse after classes had ended, supervising Thomas and Jenny as they created festive decorations from colored paper and dried autumn leaves. "May I borrow Miss Vance for a short ride?" he asked the children. "I need her opinion on something for tomorrow's gathering." Thomas exchanged a knowing look with Jenny. "We can finish these decorations ourselves, Uncle Gabe," he said with the gravity of his 15 years. "Take all the time you need." Gabriel's lips twitched with suppressed amusement as he offered Willa his arm. Outside, 2 horses waited Gabriel's chestnut stallion and a gentle bay mare that had become Willa's regular mount during their excursions. "What opinion do you need that required horses?" Willa asked as they rode away from the ranch buildings. Gabriel's eyes crinkled at the corners. "None whatsoever. I simply wanted you to myself for an hour before the house becomes overrun with guests." The late November day was crisp but sunny, perfect for riding. Gabriel led them along a creek that wound through Triple D land, its banks lined with cottonwoods whose few remaining leaves fluttered gold in the afternoon light. "Where are we going?" Willa asked after they had ridden for about 20 minutes. "There's a spot I want to show you," Gabriel replied. "It was my mother's favorite place on the ranch. I think you'll understand why when you see it." A few minutes later, the creek widened into a small lake, its surface reflecting the blue sky and surrounding hills like a perfect mirror. On its far shore stood a small cabin, rustic but well-maintained, with a porch facing the water. "My father built this for my mother when they first came to Texas," Gabriel explained as they dismounted. "She found the isolation of ranch life difficult at first, coming from London society. This was her private retreat, where she could read or paint or simply be alone with her thoughts." He led Willa to the cabin, unlocking the door with a key he carried in his pocket. Inside was a single room containing a bed, a small table and chairs, a wood stove, and bookshelves lining one wall. Everything was spotlessly clean, though with the slight musty smell of a space not frequently occupied. "It's lovely," Willa said, moving to the window that overlooked the lake. "So peaceful." Gabriel came to stand beside her. "No one uses it much anymore. Dorothy stayed here occasionally before she married James when she needed space from her overprotective older brother." His smile was self-deprecating. "I come here sometimes to think, or when ranch problems keep me awake at night." "Thank you for sharing it with me," Willa said softly, understanding the significance of his bringing her to this private family place. Gabriel turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Willa, I brought you here because this place represents what I value most: family, heritage, moments of peace in a sometimes chaotic life." His eyes held her steadily. "I want you to be part of all of that, not just for now but for always." Willa's breath caught. "Gabriel, I know we agreed to proceed slowly," he continued, "and if you're not ready, I understand. But I love you, Wilhelmina Vance. I think I began falling in love with you the moment I saw you standing in that abandoned schoolhouse doorway, looking both vulnerable and defiant." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I would be honored if you would wear it as my wife." Tears pricked Willa's eyes as emotion welled in her chest. 6 weeks ago, she had been alone and afraid, abandoned at a schoolhouse with uncertain prospects. Now this remarkable man was offering her not just security, but a future filled with love, purpose, and belonging. "Yes," she whispered, her voice catching. "Yes, Gabriel, I will marry you." Joy transformed his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling through tears. "I had a whole speech prepared," Gabriel admitted, keeping his arms around her waist. "About how quickly you've become essential to Triple D, how the children adore you, how even Coyote, the most suspicious ranch dog in Texas, rolls over for your attention." Willa laughed, wiping away a tear. "All compelling arguments, to be sure. But the truth is simpler," Gabriel continued, his expression growing serious again. "I love you, I want to build a life with you. Everything else is just details." "I love you too," Willa said, the words coming easily now that they had been spoken aloud. I never expected to find love again, especially not in a Texas ranch house. But from the moment you said you're coming home, something in me recognized that you might be home for me." They stayed at the cabin for another hour, sitting on the porch swing Gabriel's father had built, talking about their future together. They decided to announce their engagement at the Thanksgiving gathering the following day, with a spring wedding to follow once the winter cattle work was complete. As they rode back to the ranch in the gathering dusk, Willa felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The ring on her finger, hidden now beneath her glove, was a promise of belonging, of no longer being adrift in a world that had once seemed so indifferent to her happiness. The Thanksgiving celebration at Triple D was everything Willa had anticipated and more. Over 50 people gathered in the main house, spilling out onto the porch and yard as the unusually warm November day progressed. The children performed their recitations flawlessly. Beaming with pride as their parents applauded enthusiastically, Dorothy, radiant despite her recent delivery, presided over the feast with baby Michael in a cradle nearby, accepting congratulations and showing off her son with equal pleasure. James moved through the gathering with the relaxed confidence of a man deeply content with his life, while Gabriel, as host, ensured every guest felt welcomed and valued. Willa found herself drawn into countless conversations, no longer the outsider but an integral part of this community. Women who had once been merely the mothers of her students now sought her opinion on household matters or community concerns. Men who had initially viewed her with the wary respect accorded to any educated Easterner now included her in discussions about local politics or the prospects for winter weather. After the meal, when everyone had eaten their fill of Rosa's excellent cooking and the conversation had settled into a comfortable hum, Gabriel stood at the head of the long table and tapped his glass for attention. "Friends and neighbors," he began when the room had quieted, "Thanksgiving is a time for gratitude, and I have much to be thankful for this year: a healthy new nephew, a prosperous ranch, and the best community a man could hope to be part of." Murmurs of agreement and raised glasses acknowledged his words. "But I have one more blessing to share with you today," Gabriel continued, his gaze finding Willa where she sat beside Dorothy. "Miss Vance has done me the great honor of agreeing to become my wife." A moment of stunned silence was followed by an eruption of cheers, congratulations, and a few good-natured calls of "it's about time." "And thought you'd never get around to asking." Dorothy, who had been let in on the secret that morning, was beaming with delight. "I knew it," she exclaimed, hugging Willa. "From the moment he told me he was bringing you home, I suspected you might be exactly what my stubborn brother needed." As guests surged forward to offer their congratulations, Willa found herself the center of attention in a way that would have made her uncomfortable just months before. But surrounded by Gabriel's, and now her friends and neighbors, with his steady presence beside her and his mother's ring on her finger, she felt only joy and gratitude. Eliza Simmons approached, her expression carefully composed. "Congratulations, Miss Vance," she said with a formality that belied the disappointment Willa suspected she felt. "Gabriel is a good man. I trust you'll make him happy." "I intend to try," Willa replied honestly. Eliza nodded, then, with surprising grace, added, "The community is fortunate to have you as our teacher. I hope marriage won't change that." "Not at all," Willa assured her. "Teaching is my vocation, not merely an occupation." Satisfied, Eliza moved on, leaving Willa to wonder at the complexities of human relationships and the capacity for dignity even in disappointment. Later, as the celebration continued with music and dancing in the cleared dining room, Gabriel drew Willa outside for a moment of quiet beneath the star-filled sky. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely," she replied, leaning into his warmth. "Though I think your sister is already planning our wedding in excruciating detail," Gabriel laughed. "Dorothy has been planning my wedding since she was 12. I'm afraid we're in for quite a production." "I don't mind," Willa said truthfully. "After years of feeling disconnected from everyone around me, being part of a family, even an occasionally overwhelming one, sounds wonderful." Gabriel turned her to face him, his expression serious in the moonlight. "When I found you at that schoolhouse, Willa, I thought I was offering you a home. I never imagined you would become home for me. Willa reached up to touch his face, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had ridden into her life when she needed him most. That works out rather well, she murmured, since I plan to stay for a very long time. His kiss was a promise, sealed beneath the Texas stars that had witnessed countless such moments, yet somehow made this one feel uniquely theirs, two people who had found each other against all odds, creating a future neither had imagined possible until the day a cowboy rode up to an abandoned schoolhouse and said, "You're coming home." The winter months passed in a flurry of preparations, not just for the spring wedding, but also for the expansion of the schoolhouse that Gabriel insisted upon as Triple D's wedding gift to its teacher. With new families settling in the area, enrollment was expected to increase, and Gabriel wanted to ensure Willa had adequate space and resources for her growing number of students. Christmas at Triple D was a joyous affair, with the house decorated in greenery and red ribbons, gifts exchanged before a roaring fire, and carols sung around the piano that James played with surprising skill. Willa, who had spent the previous 2 Christmases alone in boarding houses, found herself overwhelmed at times by the warmth and inclusion of Gabriel's family. "Too much?" he asked gently, finding her one evening on the porch, taking a moment's respite from the cheerful chaos inside. "Not too much," she assured him, accepting the warm wrap he draped around her shoulders. "Just different, wonderful but different from what I've grown accustomed to." Gabriel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Family can be overwhelming, especially when you've been on your own for a while. Don't hesitate to take the space you need. It was this sensitivity to her feelings, this willingness to adapt and accommodate, that continually deepened Willa's love for him. Gabriel Dawson was a man accustomed to authority, to having his decisions respected and his orders followed without question. Yet with her, he consistently sought compromise and understanding, valuing her independence as much as her companionship. As winter gave way to the first tentative stirrings of spring, wedding plans solidified. The ceremony would take place at Triple D, with Reverend Thompson officiating and the entire community invited to celebrate. Dorothy, now fully recovered from childbirth and as energetic as ever, threw herself into the preparations with an enthusiasm that both touched and occasionally alarmed Willa. "You don't need to do all this," Willa protested one afternoon as Dorothy reviewed fabric samples for new curtains in what would become Willa and Gabriel's private sitting room. "The house is already beautiful." "Nonsense," Dorothy replied firmly. "This is the first time a Dawson has married at Triple D in 30 years. We're going to do it properly." Her expression softened. "Besides, Gabe deserves this happiness and so do you. Let me fuss a little." March brought the calving season, keeping Gabriel and his men working from dawn until well past dark as they assisted with difficult births and protected vulnerable newborns from predators. Despite his exhaustion, Gabriel made time every evening to sit with Willa in the library, discussing their future plans or simply enjoying each other's quiet company. "I've been thinking about the cabin by the lake," he said one night as they sat side by side on the library sofa, Willa's head resting on his shoulder as she read from a book of poetry. "Would you like to use it as your private space, as my mother did? Somewhere you can go when you need quiet or solitude?" Touched by his thoughtfulness, Willa considered the offer. "Perhaps we could share it," she suggested. "A retreat for both of us when ranch life becomes too demanding." Gabriel's smile was warm with approval. "I'd like that. A place that belongs just to us." As their wedding day approached, Willa wrote to her parents in Boston, inviting them to attend though suspecting they would decline. Her father's business commitments and her mother's health made such a long journey unlikely, but Willa wanted them to know she had found happiness, even if they couldn't witness it firsthand. To her surprise, her father's response included not only their regretful decline but also a substantial check as a wedding gift, along with her grandmother's pearl earrings that had been set aside for Willa's eventual marriage. The gesture, unexpected from parents who had been less than enthusiastic about her move west, brought tears to her eyes. "They're beautiful," Gabriel said when she showed him the earrings. "You should wear them for our wedding." "I will," Willa promised, touched by his understanding of what the gift represented: a bridge between her past and her future, a connection maintained despite distance and difference. The week before the wedding brought an unexpected visitor to Triple D Judge Parker, making a special trip to see the union he had inadvertently facilitated. "I claim some credit for this match," the elderly judge declared at dinner the night of his arrival. "Though I confess, I was thinking more of the school's needs than romance when I telegraphed Gabriel about your situation, Miss Vance." "Sometimes the best matches are those we don't see coming," Dorothy observed with a smile at her husband. "James came to treat our father and ended up treating my heart condition instead." "Is that what they're calling it these days?" James teased, earning a playful swat from his wife. The easy banter, the sense of family and belonging, Willa savored it all, hardly able to believe that in just a few days, she would officially become part of this household, not as an employee but as Gabriel's wife, as integral to Triple D as the land itself. The wedding day dawned clear and mild, a perfect early April morning with wildflowers beginning to dot the hills around the ranch. Willa woke early, too excited and nervous to sleep, and slipped out for a walk before the household stirred. The ranch was quiet at this hour, with only the occasional lowing of cattle or nickering of horses to disturb the peace. Willa made her way to the schoolhouse, now expanded with a new wing that would serve as a library and science room. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, wanting a moment in this space that had become so important to her. "I thought I might find you here," Gabriel's voice came from the doorway behind her. Nervous, Willa turned, surprised but pleased to see him. Tradition dictated they shouldn't see each other before the ceremony, but neither of them had much use for such superstitions. "Not nervous," she replied truthfully. "Just reflective. So much has changed in 6 months." Gabriel crossed to stand beside her, respecting her thoughtful mood. "Having second thoughts, not one," Willa assured him, reaching for his hand. "I was just thinking about that day at the Eagle Pass schoolhouse, how lost I felt, how uncertain of my future, and then you appeared like something from a storybook." "Hardly that," Gabriel said with a soft laugh. "Just a dusty cowboy following a judge's instructions." "My cowboy," Willa corrected, squeezing his hand. "Who said the words I didn't even know I needed to hear? You're coming home." Gabriel's eyes darkened with emotion. "And now you are home, Willa, for as long as we both shall live." They walked back to the house hand in hand, separating only when Dorothy appeared on the porch, hands on hips in mock outrage at their flouting of tradition. "You're not supposed to see the bride," she scolded her brother. "It's bad luck." "I make my own luck," Gabriel replied with a grin, but he allowed himself to be shooed away to prepare for the ceremony while Dorothy whisked Willa upstairs to the room that had been set aside for her bridal preparations. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Rosa and several other women helped Willa bathe and dress in the gown Dorothy had insisted on ordering from San Antonio, a confection of ivory satin, and lace far more elaborate than anything Willa would have chosen for herself, but undeniably beautiful. Her hair was arranged in an elegant twist, adorned with small white flowers from the ranch's greenhouse, and her grandmother's pearl earrings completed the ensemble. When she was finally ready, Dorothy stepped back, tears in her eyes. "You're beautiful, Willa. My brother is a lucky man." A knock at the door announced James, who had offered to escort Willa in the absence of her father. His low whistle of appreciation when he saw her brought a blush to Willa's cheeks. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "There's a rather anxious groom waiting downstairs, and about 100 guests filling every available space in the house and yard." Willa took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "Ready." The ceremony itself was simple but deeply meaningful. Standing before Reverend Thompson in the flower-bedecked parlor, with Gabriel's strong, steady presence beside her and their community gathered around them, Willa felt a sense of rightness that transcended mere happiness. As they exchanged vows, Gabriel's voice was clear and unwavering, his eyes never leaving hers. When he slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were as steady as they were when guiding a horse or mending a fence, sure, competent, trustworthy. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thompson declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The kiss that followed was brief but tender, mindful of their audience yet containing a promise of deeper intimacy to come. As they turned to face their guests as Mr. and Mrs. Gabriel Dawson, the cheers and applause that erupted seemed to shake the very foundations of Triple D Ranch. The celebration continued well into the evening, with feasting, dancing, and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious. Judge Parker, slightly flushed from multiple glasses of champagne, regaled the crowd with the story of how he had first met Willa in Eagle Pass and recognized immediately that she was Dawson material through and through. As twilight deepened into night, Gabriel led Willa away from the festivities toward the stables where a carriage waited, already loaded with their luggage. "Where are we going?" Willa asked, surprised by this departure from the plan to spend their wedding night at the ranch. Gabriel's smile was mysterious. "You'll see." The carriage took them along the now familiar path to the lake cabin, which came into view aglow with lamplight and decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Dorothy and James, with the help of several ranch hands, had transformed the rustic retreat into a romantic bower worthy of any honeymoon suite. "Our first home," Gabriel explained as he helped Willa from the carriage. "Just for a few days until we return to the main house. But I wanted our beginning to be just us, away from the wonderful but sometimes overwhelming family." Touched beyond words by his thoughtfulness, Willa allowed him to carry her across the threshold in the traditional manner, laughing when he pretended to stagger under her weight. Inside, the cabin had been beautifully prepared for their arrival. Fresh linens on the bed, a table set for two with covered dishes keeping warm by the fire, a bottle of champagne chilling in a bucket of ice, every detail had been considered to make their first night as husband and wife special. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, the sounds of the Texas night surrounding them, Willa marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the loneliness of that abandoned schoolhouse to the warmth of Gabriel's arms, from uncertainty to profound belonging, it seemed both miraculous and inevitable. "Happy, Mrs. Dawson," Gabriel murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Completely, Mr. Dawson," Willa replied, nestling closer to his warmth. "I've come home at last." Epilogue: 5 years later, the Triple D Ranch Schoolhouse buzzed with activity as students prepared for the end-of-year exhibition. Under Willa's direction, children of all ages arranged displays showcasing their work from the past school year maps they had drawn, compositions they had written, scientific observations they had recorded, and mathematical problems they had solved. At 30 desks now, the school had grown significantly from the 12 students Willa had inherited upon her arrival. As the area prospered, more families had settled nearby, and Triple D's reputation for excellent education had spread, drawing students from as far as 15 miles away. Willa moved among the children, offering guidance and encouragement, her 3-year-old daughter, Margaret, trailing behind her with solemn importance. Named for Gabriel's mother, little Maggie had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit, already insisting that she too was a teacher, despite her tender age. "Mama, help," she demanded, tugging at Willa's skirt and pointing to a display that had tilted precariously. "Good eye, Maggie," Willa praised, straightening the board that showcased the younger children's artwork. "You'll make an excellent teacher someday." From the doorway came a familiar voice. "Like mother, like daughter." Willa turned to find Gabriel leaning against the jamb, their 1-year-old son, Henry, perched on his hip. Both were dusty from the day's ranch work, though Gabriel had clearly made an effort to clean up before collecting their son from Rosa's care. "Papa." Maggie abandoned her supervisory duties to race toward her father, who scooped her up with his free arm, balancing both children with the ease of practice. "How are the preparations coming?" he asked, crossing to kiss Willa briefly but warmly. "Everything ready for tomorrow's onslaught of proud parents?" "Nearly," Willa replied, taking Henry from him and kissing the boy's chubby cheek. Thomas is helping the older students finish their science demonstrations, and Jenny is putting final touches on the historical timeline. Thomas Fleming, now 20 years old and studying to be a veterinarian under his father's guidance, still made time to assist in the school where his aunt had once taught, and his Aunt Willa now presided. Jenny Reeves, 17 and bound for a women's college in the East come fall, had developed a passion for history under Willa's tutelage. "Speaking of Jenny," Gabriel said, setting Maggie down to continue her self-appointed rounds, "Michael tells me he's planning to ask for her hand before she leaves for school." Willa smiled at the mention of Michael Reeves, the foreman's eldest son who had been sweet on Jenny since they were children. "It's about time. They've been dancing around each other for years. Not everyone can be as decisive as we were," Gabriel teased. "Some couples need more than 6 weeks to determine they're meant for each other," Willa laughed, shifting Henry to her other hip as he began to squirm. "We were exceptionally efficient." As they spoke, the older students began to file out, their work complete for the day. Thomas paused to greet his uncle and aunt, ruffling Maggie's hair and making faces at Henry until the baby giggled. "Everything's ready, Aunt Willa," he reported. "Jenny and I will come early tomorrow to help with any last-minute adjustments." When the schoolhouse was empty save for their family, Gabriel drew Willa into a proper embrace, mindful of the child still in her arms. "I missed you today," he murmured against her hair. "And I you," she replied, leaning into his strength. Even after 5 years of marriage, the simple fact of Gabriel's presence still filled her with warmth and gratitude. They walked back to the main house together, Maggie skipping ahead and chattering about the very important work she had done helping her mother, while Henry dozed against Willa's shoulder. The late afternoon sun bathed Triple D in golden light, highlighting the changes and improvements of the past 5 years' new outbuildings, expanded corrals. The vegetable garden Willa had insisted upon that now supplied much of the household's produce. Dorothy and James awaited them on the porch, their brood increased by twin girls born 2 years after Michael. The Fleming and Dawson children played together as cousins should, with all the love and occasional squabbles that close family entailed. "There you are," Dorothy called as they approached. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost between the schoolhouse and here." "Just enjoying the walk," Gabriel replied, lifting Maggie onto the porch rail before taking Henry from Willa so she could climb the steps unencumbered. "And discussing Jenny and young Michael," Willa added, knowing Dorothy's fondness for ranch romances. As expected, Dorothy's eyes lit up. "Has he proposed yet? Sarah Reeves told me he bought a ring in San Antonio last month." The conversation continued over dinner, expanding to include updates on ranch business, plans for the upcoming cattle drive, and James's latest medical case, a broken arm suffered by one of the newer ranch hands in a fall from a horse. Later, after the children were bathed and settled in bed, Maggie with a story from her father, and Henry with a lullaby from his mother Willa and Gabriel, retreated to their private sitting room adjoining their bedroom. This space, created during the renovations following their marriage, had become their sanctuary, a place for quiet conversation and companionship at the end of busy days. "I received a letter from my parents today," Willa said as they sat together on the comfortable sofa before the small fireplace. "They're planning to visit this summer if Father's health permits the journey." Gabriel looked pleased. "That's wonderful news. It's been, 2 years since they were here last?" 3, Willa corrected. "They haven't met Henry yet, and Maggie was barely walking when they saw her." She hesitated, then added, "Father mentioned he's considering retiring. Mother thinks the Texas climate might be beneficial for his respiratory issues." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "The old Thompson place adjoining our east pasture has been vacant since Mr. Thompson passed last winter," Willa pointed out. "It's a comfortable house, close enough for regular visits but far enough to maintain everyone's independence." Gabriel considered this. "Having your parents nearby would be good for the children, and your father's business experience could be valuable for some of the ventures we've been considering." He smiled at her hopeful expression. Let's discuss it with them when they visit. If they're seriously interested, the property could be theirs. Willa leaned over to kiss him, grateful once again for his generosity and understanding. Thank you. It would mean a great deal to me to have them close, especially as they age. Family belongs together when possible, Gabriel said simply. Triple D has always been about more than cattle and land. It's about people, about creating a place where everyone can thrive. Looking at her husband in the warm lamplight, Willa felt the familiar surge of love and appreciation that had only deepened over their years together. Gabriel Dawson was still the man who had ridden up to that abandoned schoolhouse strong, capable, direct, but marriage and fatherhood had softened some of his edges, adding new dimensions to his already complex character. I was thinking about our beginning today, she admitted. How close I came to refusing your offer that day in Eagle Pass, if I had let pride or fear guide my decision. Gabriel took her hand, his thumb brushing over the rings he had placed there. But you didn't. You took a chance on a stranger and a distant ranch. And I will spend the rest of my life ensuring you never regret that decision. I haven't regretted it for a single moment, Willa assured him. From the instant you said you're coming home, something in me recognized the truth of those words. I just didn't realize then that home wasn't a place but a person. You, Gabriel, you're my home. Gabriel's kiss was tender, a reaffirmation of the commitment they had made 5 years earlier and renewed each day since through large gestures and small, through the building of a family and a future together on the land they both loved. Outside their window, the Texas night spread vast and star-filled across the Triple D ranch. Inside, in the warmth of each other's embrace, Willa and Gabriel Dawson continued the journey that had begun with an abandoned schoolteacher, a duty-bound rancher, and 4 simple words that had changed both their lives forever. You're coming home.